Welcome csc121, spring 2020, to exercise 13. This is function exercises, very short little functions that we're going to be looking at just to understand how functions work, how returns work, and how arguments and parameters work. And we're going to look at a couple examples here. We have like 6 examples we're going to look at very quickly. I have some code here that I'm going to put in, and we're just going to look at it, and we're going to look at it one at a time. And this function that's here, just keep in mind there's a function definition. The function definition is called square num, so it's going to square a number. So whatever number you use, and there's a global variable called x equals 2. So that means it's going to square 2 by doing x times x, and that's how you square a number. So that's what it's going to do. And then we also have a variable that represents the function call. And then we're going to print out that function call. So let's see what happens. Nothing happens. Matter of fact, it says none. And that's because we have nothing being returned from the function. We have no fruit from the function. It's multiplying 2 times 2, but it has no way to kind of get it to the function call. It has no way to return the fruit, to kind of give it back and have something tangible. So you could do this. You could really do this and just print out that, because now there's something tangible. Now when you call the function, it's going to use that print function. So that works. So if you do that, that works, but if you just kind of have x times x, nothing happens. So we mentioned before that we do have fruit that comes from the function, and printing something is always fruit of the function. So that always works like that. So let me just make sure that works again. Actually, there's 2 things happening. It's printing out a 4 and it's printing out a none. It's printing out a 4 here, and then it's printing out a none because it's still not getting any fruit from the function. It's not getting a return value, so it's still trying to print out the function. So all I would really need from this one is really this, because why have 2 print statements? If the print is in here, I'd only need to do that, and then it'll print out 2 times 2. But like I said, we're going to try to do something a little bit different. So I'm going to just get rid of this for now, and that was just an example of fruit and not having fruit, and showing that print is the fruit. Now let's look at the next one here. The next one, and this might even be the same thing, and that's really the same thing. So I'll skip over this because we just did that on the first one. Remember, if it's printing out, that's fruit. And so when we call the function, it's going to basically have that fruit inside it. It's going to have the print fruit inside it. So when we run this, it'll say 4. And if we change this variable here, we'll mix it up a little, then it would be 16. It would be 4 squared, which is 16, or 4 times 4. Okay, so that's doing the print thing. And here's another example. And again, we still have a global variable, x equals 2. Now this time we're saying y equals x times x, and we're saying print y. Now saying print y is fine. Now if we didn't have print y, here, let me just cut that for a second. If we didn't have print y, and we just said y equals x times x, there's no way, again, it's the same as doing just x times x. Y equals x times x doesn't really help us either, because we're not getting the y to the function. It's not, the fruit isn't getting there yet. This function isn't returning any fruit. It's just saying y equals x times x. That's the same as if you just said x times x. So if we run this, we shouldn't have anything really important happen. Matter of fact, it's not really showing anything here when we call the function. But if I put this back here, I paste that back and I say print y, now it's getting some fruit, because like I said, when you print something in a function, that's always the fruit. So it should print y, because that should represent 4. So that works, and that's fine. Now, again, what we really want to do, and this might be D or something, but anyway, what we really would want to do is say return y, because y is going to represent x times x. But if we return y, then we can actually send it. Then that function gets something back. When you return something, that means the function gets something back. So when we call the function, it's going to return that. Now, if I do this right now, nothing's going to happen, because we're still not outputting it. We're still not outputting it. That's why you'd almost want to do something like result. I was doing that before. Result equals that, and then print the result. We can do that. So, and that's kind of a simpler way to do it. So result is basically holding whatever the function returns. So square num is getting y. So it's holding y. And if we say result equals y, it's going to be 4. And if we print result, it's going to print 4. So that's what's going to happen. And that's working okay. So that's getting fruit. This return y is getting fruit from the function. So the fruit of the function is y, which is 4. And whatever it is, if you could put in a different number here, the fruit of the function is now going to be 9, because it's doing 3 times 3. All right, hopefully that makes sense. And I'll go back here. And now here's another one. Now this is doing what we just said. we're saying y equals x times x. Result, that's just what we did. And again, the problem here is we have no fruit. I think I already did it in the previous one. We have nothing returning y. So we need to say return y. We need to get that fruit from the function. So by saying return y, that's going to get that fruit from the function. Then we could print it and do whatever we want with it. We could hold that value and put it in a print statement with a percent and all kinds of, we could do other math with it if we wanted to. But right now that we get that fruit from it, now it'll give me that 4 back. So that's what we just did. So we'll move on to E. Let's see what's happening in E here with this example. We're saying y equals x times x, which again, y will represent whatever that number is. Wait, what number? There's no x there. So there's no local variable or there's no global variable that we're putting in here. So what's it using? Well, it's using an argument down here. We're sending it in down here with the function call. So we're sending 2 in. Remember, like that exercise where we did the test input, x equals 2. It's almost like using a local variable inside the function here by saying it's almost doing this. This is essentially what it's doing. You could, like I said, you could take that out and you could run this, and that's really what it's doing. It's saying x equals 2, but if you take this out of here, because that's kind of like wordy, and that way you can call the function and put any value in that you want. So you could put in 3 down here. It's the same thing as setting a variable to equal something. So we're just sending it with the function. So square num is going to use the argument as 3, and it's going to put 3 in there, and then it's going to say y equals 3 times 3. It's going to return y, which is 9, and then it should print out 9. So again, this is an example of sending an argument for parameter, and that parameter is used as a variable to basically run through the steps in the function. And we're still returning y, which is the fruit, and we're still printing out the fruit of the function. That's why this whole function call represents fruit, and result is the fruit that we're going to print out. All right, let's look at our last example here. This last example for F is just using 2 examples. The calculation is just adjusted a little bit. These 2 asterisks here mean to the power of. So we're saying y equals x to the power of power. Now, power could be anything you want. It could be, now here's our arguments. We have 2 arguments. We have 2, which represents x, or x represents 2, and power is going to be represented by 4. So when this function gets called, it's going to send in a 4, send in a 2, and it's going to say 2 to the 4th power, and it should return 16. So let's see what happens. And it does. It returns 16 because it's basically using 2 for the x, 4 for that, and whatever you call this is fine. You could use p. I could have just used p in here. It doesn't matter. You just want to be consistent, so these kind of match up, but this is just representing whatever number you send in there. It's x to that power. So if you want to do 3, that'll end up as a 9. So that way it's sending in 2 to the 3rd power. Oh no, 8, I'm sorry. It's to the 3rd power, so it's 2 times 2 times 2. So it's 2 times 2, which is 4 times 2 is 8. So it's putting that to the 3rd power rather than the 2nd power. And you could change the power. You could square things. You could put 2 here and say, what's 16 squared? Which I think is like 256 or something like that. Let's see what that is. Yeah, it's 256. So if you figure out that, again, this time it's using 2 as the power, and it's using x as the number. And you could do things like n represents the number, or whatever. You could do whatever you want that makes sense to you. So this is sending in multiple arguments to multiple parameters. And they're just placeholders that are holding the variables in there. Again, we're still returning fruit. Y is still the fruit that we're returning, so result still represents whatever fruit we're getting from here by using these 2 numbers. We're throwing these 2 numbers in and getting fruit back, and the fruit back we're getting is result, and we're printing out result. So that's how that works with arguments and parameters. And that's just a little intro to functions as we start to move on throughout the semester.